Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight on our webinar called Unschooling Myths, Realities, and Benefits. And I hope this will be helpful to you because whenever unschooling hits the news, whether through newspaper comments or video comments or TV interviews, and people are allowed to comment under, and they have never heard of unschooling before, you will hear about the myths because it comes out in their questions and their comments like, this child will never get up for a job, this child will never be educated and have to work at McDonald's the rest of their life. And it's so not true. And it makes me just want to scream from the rooftops that no, this is not true. There are many thousands of unschoolers out there who are very functioning, great citizens. So if you have naysayers in your life, show them this video because you'll probably get those questions around the holiday dinner table too. So I am Judy Arnall, and I teach brain and child development in my work life, and I'm an education consultant. And I've been certified in several brain courses to know more knowledge and also to teach. I'm a bit of an idealist, but I'm also a realist. I have 5 of my own children, and they are all adults now, which is great. And 3 are university graduates. 1 is in university, 1 is a master's student, and 1 is just wrapping up grade 12. Not sure if he's heading to university or not. He's not sure either. So yes, I can attest to the fact that all of my kids slept in till 2 p.m. when they were teenagers. And yes, all of them got up for 8 a.m. classes or to start work at 7 a.m. So a lot of the myths don't work. I unschool my children anywhere from, it depended, from 8 to all 12 years. So I'll talk a little bit about that. I am a non-punitive parenting advocate, absolutely non-punitive. I don't believe in punishments, consequences, anything like that. And naturally that carries over into education too. I do not believe in bribing or punishing kids to learn because they're very good learners as they are. So I've written a few books on non-punitive parenting, and my latest book is Unschooling to University. They've been translated into different languages, and I also teach various courses on non-punitive parenting. So the book I wrote was Unschooling to University. So when my oldest 3 started going off to college and university, a lot of their unschooling friends did too. And I found 30 of them that were going. And I thought, okay, somebody needs to write a book about this. So I thought, okay, I'm going to write a book about it. So 30 kids unschooled from 3 years to 12 years. And of those 30 kids, 10 were in STEM careers, 10 were in humanities, and 10 were in arts. And of those 10 STEM, we had actually 4 engineers in the group. Today, 22 of them have graduated their programs. So obviously, they get up for those 8 a.m. classes. I call them the team of 30. And I also started a group called Unschooling Canada. If you, this is what the webinar is for. I have a blog, so come visit me. So let's just talk a little bit about unschooling, just so we're on the same page of what unschooling is. I'm going to just turn off my video right now, and I'll come back in the end, just because it's so distracting. So unschooling is called self-directed education in a school or in the education world. Most people under homeschooling, which is where it's most easily undertaken, call it unschooling. Now, in most self-directed learning schools, children can only control the pace of what they learn. They cannot control what they learn, how much they learn, when they learn it, what they use to learn it, how they learn it, or how they're assessed on that learning. But in self-directed education or unschooling, the learner controls all these things. So kids decide what they're going to learn, when they're going to learn, if they're going to learn, how much they're going to learn, how they're going to learn, and whether it's going to be tested or not. That is all within the learner's control. And that's what I mean when I talk about self-directed education. So if a child chooses to go into a classroom and get direct instruction from a teacher, they are still self-directing their education in that they choose that methodology, the assessment, the resources. They choose all that. And if they choose to play video games all day and learn what they need to learn through video games, that is self-directed education too, because they choose it. So it's always the learner's agenda. That to me is the number one difference between school or, because school is not the learner's agenda, just the paces. So if you look at when children are born and they play, that's what they do. They play, they investigate, they explore. And then by age 5 or 6, we take them off the play track and we put them on the school track and say, okay, you're not going to play anymore. You have to learn what we want you to learn in school. And yet, if you leave kids be, you don't take them off that play track, they continue to learn actually a lot of what the school age kids learn, but in their own way through play and projects. I was quite amazed at how the topics in school from grades 1 to 6 were things my kids naturally came to through their play, and they learned the same thing. So most every child is going to learn how to read, how to write, how to do basic arithmetic in these 6 years between 6 and 12 without any direct instruction. They're going to learn it through play. Even the teen years, kids are going to learn how to write essays, how to do mathematics. They're going to probably need a bit more outside instruction if they want it to learn about chemistry and biology and philosophy and geography. If they're interested in it, they will learn more about that through self-teaching. And then what happens about 17, 18, they can write the same exams because it's not like they didn't learn anything. They've just learned it in a different way. And that is what unschooling is. Unschoolers are not uneducated. They're educated, but they learn through play. School kids are educated. They learn through workbooks and textbooks and someone lecturing to them. Whereas kids learn it more through self-exploration and experiential learning. But all unschoolers are educated. And like I said, learning to read is a natural developmental skill that is learned either from age 4 to about age 12. It occurs somewhere along that line, and it just clicks. The brain parts work. The occipital lobe works with the frontal lobe, works with the temporal lobe to recognize language, text, and letters and meaning. And so again, kids just learn that naturally to read. But because most kids learn to read in school, when they're in school, we assume that school has taught them, even though they have learned it naturally. So all children are going to be literate and numerate. Now, a lot of kids will, so for example, will a 17-year-old know how to factor polynomials? Well, maybe not, unless that's something they seek out. But everyone can figure out percents, can figure out addition, subtraction, multiplying, dividing, decimals, and fractions. The higher order mathematics, no, they might need more in-depth instruction in that from a book, but if they want it, they're going to get it. Absolutely. So unschooling is freedom to learn. It's a philosophy and lifestyle of educational freedom in which a child's natural curiosity and motivation nurtured in a rich and stimulating environment, will lead the child to learn what he or she needs to know in the time frame he or she needs it. Simple as that. When the student wants, the teacher appears. And that teacher can be in the form of video games, books, whatever. So what do unschooled kids do all day? This is what they do. Depending on their ages, if they're under age 5, they're going to play. If they're ages 6 to 12, they're going to do a lot of these things. If they're teenagers, they're going to do more projects, crafts, volunteering, maybe run a small business, and travel and research. So they don't just sit there and do nothing. They do things that actively teach them something about the world and their place in it. So let's look at these myths and realities. Common myths. Okay, learners need teachers more than facilitators. Not true. Learners need information from any source. It could be direct instruction from a teacher. It could be a facilitator setting up an environment that's more learning, or they can self-teach. Learners learn from everywhere and everything, which takes us to their educational resources and junk resources. Every piece of resource out there teaches the child something. It can be literacy, it can be numeracy, it can be science, social, geography, philosophy, you name it. Even video games. Call of Duty teaches a child something just as much as Minecraft does. Absolutely. Children need adults to occupy their time only if you buy into that myth. And that is such a myth out there. I love May and June where all the companies out there say, what are you going to do to entertain your child this summer? You know, and when kids homeschool or unschool, they own their time. They learn to occupy themselves. Sure, there's times when they're bored and they need a nudge and something to do, but for the most part, homeschooling parents do not entertain their kids or occupy their time. Kids find their own things to do. Now, we do have to nudge them to clean up their messes a bit, but until they go on to something new, but they do not. They do occupy themselves. Learning and socialization can only occur in school. Well, we talked about learning, but socialization too occurs everywhere. Everywhere kids, people, adults congregate, children can make friends. Play is frivolous and time-wasting. Many people believe that. We know in the medical community that play has a very, very specific purpose for children. It helps them work out their inner anxieties, their inner questions about how the world works. Play is a child's work, and it doesn't end when that child is age 5. Even adults love to play. When I'm at conferences and I get participants to stand up and do something, they love it. They love engaging. Well, except for the few introverts in the crowd, but I'm an introvert. I hate doing it. But it does cement learning in the brain. It is very, very good for learning. Play is learning. You cannot separate the two. Earlier education and more of it is good. The world seems to be moving that way, and yet scientifically we know that's not the case. What children need is more play and self-directed learning, because more of it sinks into their brain, into long-term memory. If it's something that other people want them to learn and they don't see the relevancy, they lose it as soon as the exam is over. Kids won't learn a work ethic if not trained early. I'll talk about that in the next slide. Kids won't learn basics, and kids have too much power. Let's look at that. Okay, we need to teach a work ethic. Absolutely, we do need to teach a work ethic, but do we need to teach it while they're 5, while they're 9, while they're 14? No, we don't. The thing about unschooling is when the need arises, then it happens. That's when children learn it. So when a child gets a job that they have to get up at 8 a.m. for, they'll get up at 8 a.m. for it. When kids need to sign up for an 8 a.m. class, they're going to set their alarm and get up for it. They do not need practice in these things. Absolutely not. Another myth is children can't handle that much control. And really, it's a myth that we think we can control children's education, because every brain in every person owns their education from the minute they're born to the minute they're not breathing. They already own their education. We cannot give it to them. And just ask any parent of a junior high kid who's complaining their kids don't do homework. They know they can't control what that child learns. They know it, and they're trying to force the kids to learn that they can't. Sure, they can make them do the assignments. They can make them study for the exam, but they can't force them to retain that information after. Learning is a function of somebody's own brain. So how do children control their education? If they don't like what they're studying, they act out. And as they get older, in the teen years, they tune out. And by the time they're old enough to drop out of school, they do. That's how they control their education. So why not hand it over to children earlier? We think we control it, we can force them, but let's empower them to take control of their education and learning. The sooner, the better, because they ultimately have it. Now, there's a myth. Some things kids just have to do. They have to learn the country's anthem. They have to learn about history. Yes, of course, some things kids just have to do, but that's good parenting, not education. Discipline should not be equated to learning. Discipline is the development of self-control, and that's a function of executive function in the brain. It's a development step that happens, and discipline is when something needs to be done and somebody doesn't want to do it. So for example, if I have a piece of chocolate cake in front of me and I want to stay on my diet, discipline is overriding the dopamine in my brain, that desire for dopamine, by eating the cake and using my prefrontal cortex executive function to say, nope, I'm not going to eat this cake. I want to lose weight. And that is discipline. And that muscle grows through good parenting and also through development of the prefrontal cortex. So we don't need to force kids to learn to teach them discipline. Again, like I said, work ethic. Children exhibit an ethic when the brain is ready and the need is there. Now, some kids are more organized than others, and their executive function develops faster, but that's okay. And perseverance comes from passion and temperament. It's not something you can teach people. Commitment comes from intrinsic motivation, and that comes from ownership. If children do not own their education, they're not committed to it. And the sooner we let them know they own their education, the better. I always was upfront with my kids. Even the years they tried school, I said, I am not going to give you pizza coupons for reading. And the school would send home forms that the parents could fill out, and they would give the coupons too. And to me, that was crazy. Why would you bribe someone to learn? When learning comes and is motivated from inside. If children want to learn to read for the pure joy that they get to enjoy books and they can be a functioning citizen, that is where the bribery is or the payoff is. It's not pizza coupons for number of books read. And children get more responsible as their prefrontal cortex develops in the teen years. So work ethic is a life skill that needs modeling and encouragement, but not coercion. It happens. Another myth is, will there be gaps? Well, of course there will be gaps, but there's gaps when kids go to school too. Um, Schools cannot teach every country in the world. The 200 countries, they cannot teach. They have to pick and choose certain countries to teach kids. Same with unschooling. Why should a child be forced to learn about Brazil when they're more interested in Japan? So it's all the same. Country, learning about cultures and food is the same. But if they're more interested in Japan, why not let them explore Japan instead of Brazil? So yes, there will be a gap. They won't know about Brazil, but the school kids will have a gap not knowing about Japan. So you can't force a child to learn, and you can't stop a child from learning. So if there's a gap and a child wants to fill it, they will. Absolutely. I remember my daughter went to Brownies and was very upset because she didn't know the anthem, and everybody else did. So she comes home and she is motivated to learn it. We find it on YouTube. She practices. Next Brownie meeting, she's there singing away. So when children acknowledge they may have gaps in their learning, they do want to fill them in if there's a need. And some gaps, there are never a need. How many adults can factor a trinomial? And is there a need for that? Sure, it trains the brain, but it can damage the psyche. If you do not need to know how to factor a trinomial for your adult work, that's not a problem. Nobody can know everything in life. But who picks and chooses what your child learns? Your child knows best. And some gaps just get filled in because of interest. My question is, how many of us had formal lessons in sexuality? Not many. I think we got one lesson in school in grade 5, and that was it. And yet we all come to know what it's about without any formal direct teaching. So yes, your kids pick up a lot of information informally and formally if they desire it. Okay, now, a common worry about parents is, well, if I don't teach them something, they're not going to learn it. Again, not true. So all 5 of my kids were very much online kids. They never went to school that they'd have to learn cursive. So when they got to university and computers were banned in lecture halls, they had to write or print out their notes. They had to print out exams. And they found this was a hardship for them. And I would say it's a hardship for the professors trying to read this. So they decided, okay, I need to learn cursive. So I got them some grade 1 books, and they practiced and practiced, and this is what it looks like 3 months later. And even now, you should see it's beautiful. So when the need is there, they're gonna fill the need. There are gaps, they'll fill them. Whatever they need, they decide when they need it. Okay, a lot of parents worry, well, what about math? That seems to be the question for parents when they're unschooling is, how do I let go of math? Because they've been told their whole life math is sequential. And it is. Your child is going to learn about math. They're going to learn about addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, decimals, and fractions, whether they're taught or not, just through their everyday life, through experiential learning, through cooking, through baking, through shopping. They're going to learn all that in their heads. That's what we call mental math. Symbolic math is learning how to actually do the operations on paper. That is when really good for the teen years. So starting grade 7, 8, or age 13 is a good time to start learning math symbolically, because then the prefrontal cortex is developed and it can think abstractly and theoretically. So that's a good time to start paper math. Now, on my blog, I have lots of ways to learn math without a workbook. And I talk about all the ways kids learn math like these through play and experiential learning. Same with all these. They can learn through play and projects and games, board games, Battleship, reading books, and just living life, they can learn these things. This is x squared plus 4x plus 3. Now, grade 8, like I said, is a good trans over to paper math, where they can actually learn these things and figure them out on paper. And yes, they can do 8 grades of math in 1 year, because they're not learning 8 grades of math. They're learning how to put it on paper. They're experiential to paper. And after about a year, they get it all straight. Same with these. These can all start at 13. What about reading? I know no unschooled child who is illiterate. I know the range from reading, like I said, is about 4 to 12. And kids who are immersed in a literate society where there's letters all over the place, where there's language, when they hear people talk and converse, they're going to learn reading. And so my group, I had an early reader at age 4, and I had a late reader at age 10, and everybody in between. Their first class they wrote essays was grade 10 and grade 11. Again, when the need happens, that's when they learn to write an essay. So this is my 10-year-old learned to read. This is what he was reading within a year. So you can't go back and tell who was reading what at what age. Just like toilet training, it's a developmental skill. You don't know who was toilet trained at age 18 months or 4 years, because everyone uses a toilet. And same with reading. Everyone learns to read. A common question I get is, why are there some people that are still illiterate? And I say it could be a lack of resources in their environment, maybe a lack of books, lack of conversation, and it could be a learning disability. So English language arts is all about communication. It's not just reading, writing, but it's also speaking, listening, viewing, and representing. And everybody learns that. As a society, we're going away from writing. You look at the use of YouTube and videos and TikTok, and people watch video now. They don't read as much. And when I went to university, we regularly handed in 15-page essays. When the team of 30 went to university in humanities, 1,500 words tops was their essays. So we are moving away. But kids still love books, and reading, letting them read, reading to them stimulates that language. That's how you can facilitate literacy. We live in a literate world, we really do. Writing or workbooks is good when kids get to the teen years. Again, like abstract math, that's when abstract writing essays really can kick into their interest level. And everybody can learn to write an essay. Even in grade 12, this is such a popular resource among homeschoolers. It's a grade 12 workbook. They're learning how to write a 5-paragraph essay. My kids didn't write essays till grade 10 and 11, and they're fine. They did well in university. Okay, speaking is having chances to speak. Again, it's a skill that if you do a lot of it, you get better at it. But speaking is also about confidence and confidence in themselves as learners. This is a good way to encourage. There's lots of ways to encourage speaking. And one of the best ones is when your children talk, really, really listen to them. Encourage their thoughts. And they will do the same to you. Listening is a learned skill. What about science and social studies? Science is best learned experientially, better than a textbook. Of course, in the teen years, they might go to textbooks, but for young children, learning science is all around us in water, snow, rocks, weather. It's just a beautiful thing to learn through 5 senses: hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, talking, touching. And social studies is best learned through museums, through, and science centers, through travel, through exploring places, through talking to people, through having a family from another culture over for dinner and learning about how they live. This is where we went to concentration camp in Germany. That was so much more experientially educational than reading about it in a book. Same with science. The more hands-on, the better. And like I said, many people, their doubts are, isn't that giving too much power to a child? But it's not. They own their education. They own their learning. Socialization tends to be a concern for people in homeschooling, not just unschooling. And I always say forced association is not socialization. Everybody needs to pick their own friends. And there are 3 institutions which are rampant with bullying, and those are mental hospitals, jails, and schools, because those people do not have a choice not to be there. When children have choices, they like people more and they get along people more. Social skills is also more than finding friends. It's about being a good person. And the best way to learn is around other adults and more mentors. And they can learn much better through real life interaction. People skills are not taught by digital technology, online classes, or one teacher on a playground of 20 kids. Okay, so if you want to unschool but you're still feeling a little anxious, some of the tips that helped me, and yes, I'm a real advocate now, but I had my doubts too, as many many parents do. But when you notice your child doing something amazing, maybe they had an aha moment, like they figured out what a variable is. Take a picture or just write down a comment in a journal, because you go back and you think, wow, on your doubtful days, you can read back and think, oh yeah, they learned this and this and this all on their own. Or I don't know where they learned it, but they learned it. Find your support networks like unschoolingcanada.ca. Come join us. We're very supportive. Read books, read magazines, read websites, podcasts. Learn about kids. They're out there. There are tons of unschooled kids out there working, functioning. I know I have 3 kids who are working in their careers right now, and when their coworkers learned they were homeschooled, they never told them they were unschooled. When they learned they were homeschooled, they say, oh, wow, I didn't know that. You're so sociable, right? There's lots of myths out there, and the best way is to get out there and experience children who are unschooled and homeschooled. Can parents work? Yes, absolutely. You can unschool through childcare situations, through parent co-ops, through even older siblings facilitating younger siblings to learn through experiences. Does this work for children who are neurodiverse? Of course. In fact, it even works better. If you have a child with ADHD, the last thing they need is an online course or worksheets through homeschooling. Maybe they need to play more video games and do more experiential discovery learning. Which brings us to, what if they play video games all day? Is that bad? No. For many years, our curriculum came in a little blue box called the Nintendo GameCube. And that was our only curriculum. I have 5 gamers, and they played hours on day. And it was great. Games teach cooperation, critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, innovation, just as well. They stimulate the brain cells just as well as a math workbook would. Absolutely. Same action. I talk more about video games, the benefits, in my book, Unschooling to University. One problem with this, one concern parents have is, will it create an addiction? And we know through brain research is that addictions are caused by children growing up in adverse childhood experiences. If a child has no or very low adverse childhood experience, such as 1, they are not going to have their genes expressed as addictions. So Yes, video games may be compelling, but they're not addictive if a child is raised in a functional, healthy environment. So there's lots of benefits of the internet. My kids do so much research on the internet. They argue with people on Reddit. They form their debate skills, their writing skills. And it's great. It encourages a lot of literacy. And in fact, a lot of text reading on the internet is more than people do in reading books now. Academic benefits of gaming, I outlined these in my books too. I talked about some of these also. We found games spurred our children's creativity so that they would make things that represented things they loved in video games, like this World of Warcraft cup. And here's an example of all the academic things kids learn through playing with Lego, playing Minecraft, playing the board game Settlers of Catan. All these wonderful, wonderful academic skills can be done through play and learned through play. Some more examples. These are Kirby's and Pokemon and Thunderbirds. And my kids wrote tons of stories. I would have to scribe for them. And they would draw the pictures and tell me the story. And they wanted to do this. They did it till it drove me crazy. I had to write so much. They draw pictures and make costumes. And as they got better at art, they did their own pictures. And they play stories, they made Lego. It's very creative stuff. Costumes, painting, wooden things, more costumes, and more painting. And then they got bigger and made more elaborate costumes for Comic Fest. So instead of asking how to get your boys off of gaming, ask how to get your girls on, because there is a wide range of academic, social, and wonderful things to learn through games. Yeah, we need just to market it better. Lots of life skill benefits of gaming. And socialization benefits of gaming too, especially now that games are sandbox types. Just make sure the kids have a balanced life. Make sure they have conversations. There's tech-free times. Have family rules. At my website, professionalparenting.ca, I actually have a non-punitive parenting child internet contract, which is meets parents' needs, meets kids' needs. It's really good. It's non-punitive. Okay, so what are the benefits of unschooling? I wrote about 61 benefits in the book Unschooling to University. Each one has a chapter, actually. The academic benefits, the emotional benefits, social benefits, physical benefits, and societal benefits. Not going to go through them all here, but I'll go through the main advantages. Number one is motivation is never a problem, ever, ever, ever. The child is always developmentally ready for the material they're learning, which is great. It's awesome. These are more of the advantages. Maybe I'll go through these. Learning anxiety is not present because they don't feel forced to learn. They understand rather than just memorize for a test. They develop independence, self-reliance, and responsibility. They learn how to access information. The absorption is very high because they're developmentally ready. There's no lesson plans required. No power struggles between the child and the teacher. A love of learning for its intrinsic value is developed rather than pizza coupons. Creativity, initiative, decision-making, and problem-solving is enhanced. It covers all learning styles, and they're exposed to a diverse society. Okay, there's a few disadvantages. Children's interests erupt at inconvenient times, often before bed, and you just kind of have to put it on the back burner for the evening. Cost may be a barrier of what they want to do. My son needed parts to make a 3D printer, and that for him was a cost problem, but we helped them work it out with jobs. And learning is difficult to measure. We are a society that treasures what we can measure, and society has a big problem with unschooling because they cannot measure it. Learning is invisible because many students don't produce output. It's there in their brain, they're learning, but they don't show that they're learning. So that's why I use the criteria. The unschoolers that went to university, colleges, tech schools, they were all accepted. That was the baseline proof that, yeah, they're going to do okay. If they are accepted to post-secondary, then obviously they've learned something. And it really does require trust that your child's learning what they need to learn. And that's a huge barrier for a lot of parents. Okay, that brings us to our time. Can play replace school? Absolutely, it can replace school. Children, remember, play looks differently. A teenager at play is going to look different than a 5-year-old at play. But rest assured, children will learn everything they need to learn when they decide they need it. I like this poem. I tried to teach my child with words. They often passed him by unheard. I tried to teach my child with books. He only gave me puzzled looks. Despairingly, I turned aside. How could I teach this child? I cried. Into my hand, he placed the key. Come, he said, and play with me. And that's by Anonymous. So, if you need to know more, I have 384 pages of learning about unschooling, and I go into it a lot more in depth, obviously, for people who want the in depth. And feel free to keep in touch. I will. I have a blog. I have a blog on parenting, non-punitive parenting. I have a Facebook page called Unschooling to University. I have a group called Unschooling STEM, and you can find me anywhere on the internet, including my website at Professional Parenting. So thank you for joining us tonight, and I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, feel free to hunt me down. Okay, well, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.